If I am going to tell you how to be a writer, that will probably entail telling you what writing is, and that means telling you where writing comes from. And as far as I understand it, writing evolved from Paleolithic shamanism. And when that had happened, that allowed human consciousness, as we know it at the moment, to commence. Yeah, sure, we had something before then. We had awareness, we had empathy. We could perhaps gesture and grunt. But before we could write down the language, we could not retain any information. We could not utilize our developing consciousness. And thus, the people who had discovered the wonderful ability of writing would have had supernatural powers in the eyes of the people surrounding them. They would have been able to send their thoughts at a distance to somebody else who could read. They would be able to capture moments, to write down and record events which would lead to the understanding of cause and effect and seasonal differences. These things would lead to science and art and almost every field of human endeavour, all arising from this old Stone Age magic. And when we look at the development of writing and magic, we begin to see that they're actually the same thing. That all of the artistic effects from painting, but especially to writing, all of these effects are things that were regarded as magical powers in the ancient world, as supernatural powers. Such was their force because they could change the world, they could change human consciousness, and they could change the world that we lived in. Essentially, the world that we are living in now is one where we have unpacked our imagination and are living amongst those parts of our imagination that we've been able to bail out from inside our heads. The original bardic tradition of magic was one that was entirely based upon writing and literature. And interestingly, it was much more feared than just your common or garden witch or sorcerer. Now, if a magician puts a curse upon you, then your hens are probably going to lay a bit funny, your child might be born with a squint. These are things that are survivable, they're not that terrible. Whereas, when a bard puts a satire upon you, then that will destroy you in the eyes of your friends, in the eyes of your family, potentially in your own eyes. And if it's a good enough satire, if it is finely worded enough, then even 200 or 300 years after you're dead, people might still be laughing at you and your absurdity. That was why satires were feared. Now, the early gods of writing, the scribe gods, gods like Odin or Thoth or Hermes, these are also the gods of magic. And I don't believe that that is entirely a coincidence, that in my estimation, writing and magic are practically the same thing. So, I would like to think that the current generation of aspiring writers will not sell themselves short in this. That you should never think of yourself as purely an entertainer for hire who is lucky to have the work. You should try to remember the tradition that you are becoming part of. You should try to remember that a writer can change the world with their writing. Think of the books that have completely changed human history and see yourself in that light, because If you are a writer, then the substances that you are handling, the things that you are juggling, you are having an effect upon human history and the entirety of the human future.